My family told me I'd inherit nothing because I'm adopted, but then the lawyer called. I was in my apartment, a small but warm space filled with plants and quiet light, when the call came. It was a Thursday afternoon, and I was debugging a piece of code that had been crashing all morning. The number on the screen wasn't familiar, but I answered anyway. "Mr. Brian Carter?" the voice asked. "This is Andrew Keating, your father's attorney. I'm very sorry for your loss." I froze. "He's gone?" "Yes, he passed last night in his sleep." I didn't speak for a moment. I'd known it was coming. Pancreatic cancer doesn't give you much time, but the finality still hit me like a punch to the chest. "Thank you," I said quietly. "There will be a formal reading of the will at the family estate this Saturday at noon. I hope you can attend." "I'll be there." After we hung up, I sat in silence. Not grief, not yet. Just stillness. I thought of Frank, the man who had chosen me when no one else did. I was 8 when he and Sylvia adopted me. I remember the first time he held my hand. It was steady, warm. He used to tell me, "You're part of this family now, Brian. Don't let anyone tell you otherwise." But they did, constantly. Sylvia never looked at me the way she looked at Derek or Jessica. To her, I was a burden Frank brought home one day, a charity project, not a son. Derek reminded me every chance he got that I wasn't really one of them, and Jessica, well, Jessica ignored me unless she needed something, and then it was always with that smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. Still, I tried. I got good grades, kept my room clean, said please and thank you. I thought if I were perfect enough, maybe one day they'd forget I came from somewhere else. They never did. Saturday came, gray and drizzling, the kind of weather that made everything feel like a funeral. I pulled up the long gravel driveway to the house I'd once called home. The mansion stood just as tall and cold as I remembered, columns at the front, stone lions by the stairs, ivy climbing up its aging bones. It looked like something out of a Gothic novel, or maybe a crime scene. Derek's car was already there, a sleek black Porsche he insisted on driving like a race car. Jessica's little white Mercedes was beside it, parked diagonally like always, and Sylvia's Tesla, pristine and smug, like her. I stepped inside and was immediately hit with the scent of polished wood and old money. Sylvia was in the foyer, wearing a black dress that looked like it cost more than my rent. "You're early," she said flatly. "I didn't want to be late." She didn't reply, just turned and walked into the sitting room. I followed, not knowing where else to go. Derek was slouched on the couch, scrolling through his phone. He looked up and smirked. "Well, look who crawled back." Jessica didn't even look up from her nails. "Did you get lost on the way to the orphanage, Brian?" I sat down without responding. I was used to this. What surprised me, though, was how little it bothered me now. Maybe grief does that. It makes room for clarity. Mr. Keating arrived right on time. He was tall, in his 60s, with thin silver hair and a leather briefcase that looked older than I was. "Thank you for coming," he said, nodding at each of us. Frank wanted this to be formal. I'll read the contents of his will, as signed and witnessed 2 months ago. Sylvia leaned forward, lips tight. Derek cracked his knuckles. Jessica yawned. Mr. Keating opened the envelope and began to read. I, Franklin James Carter, being of sound mind and body, do hereby declare this my last will and testament. The legal stuff came first, then the actual distribution. To my beloved wife Sylvia, I leave the beach house in Martha's Vineyard and her personal trust. Sylvia's lips twitched, satisfied. To my son Derek I leave the management of Carter Enterprises, with the understanding that he will act in accordance with the board of directors. Derek smirked. Typical. To my daughter Jessica, I leave the family's art collection and a sum of $250,000 for continued education. Jessica actually smiled. Then there was silence. My name wasn't mentioned. I looked at Mr. Keating. He glanced at me, then cleared his throat. That concludes the will, he said. Sylvia turned to me. her tone sweet but poisonous. "I'm sure Frank meant to leave you something, dear. Maybe a thank you card." Derek chuckled. Jessica crossed her legs and started texting. I sat there, heart hammering in my chest, trying to process the emptiness of it. No letter, no mention, nothing. And just as I stood to leave, Mr. Keating spoke again. "Actually, there's one more document." The office smelled like leather and dust. Mr. Keating had moved us from the main sitting room into his private legal office for the formal reading, claiming it was more appropriate. The walls were lined with books, the kind no one reads anymore, all thick spines and golden lettering, like props in an old courtroom drama. A grandfather clock ticked steadily in the corner. I sat near the window, staring out at the drizzle streaking down the glass. My chest still felt hollow from the first reading. No mention of my name, not even a thank you. Just the cold silence that came after a final sentence. Sylvia, dressed like a grieving queen, took the seat at the head of the long oak table. Derek and Jessica flanked her like royal guards. No one invited me to sit closer. I didn't ask. "You didn't actually think you'd be in the will, did you?" Sylvia said suddenly, her voice cutting through the room like ice. I turned to her slowly. I don't know what I thought. Her smile was thin, humorless. "Frank had a kind heart. Too kind, maybe. Taking you in, that was just charity. A man trying to right the world's wrongs. But blood is blood, Brian. You were never meant to stay." Derek snorted. "You should have seen your face when Keating didn't read your name. That was priceless." Jessica let out a soft, mock-sympathetic sigh. "I guess you can go now, right? I mean, unless you're staying for the sandwiches." They laughed. "I didn't. I loved him," I said quietly. "He was my dad." Sylvia's eyes darkened. "He was my husband, and their father. You were just a boy with nowhere else to go." Frank never really understood what that meant. "He told me I was part of this family. He told you a lot of things, I'm sure," she said with a cold shrug. "But we all know what you are, Brian. You're not a Carter. You never were." I looked at Derek, smug, arms crossed, perfectly satisfied, and Jessica, who had returned to filing her nails like nothing in the world mattered beyond her cuticles. And for the first time, I didn't feel sad. I felt detached, like I was watching a play I'd seen too many times. Mr. Keating cleared his throat again, bringing some formality back into the room. "As stated earlier, the original will signed 2 months ago divided the estate in the following way: the Martha S. Vineyard property to Mrs. Carter, Carter Enterprises to Mr. Derek Carter, and a monetary sum to Miss Jessica Carter." Sylvia lifted her chin like she'd won something. "Justice," she whispered. "Additionally," Mr. Keating continued, "all remaining assets, real estate, personal effects and investments were to be transferred into a family trust, administered by Mrs. Carter, with benefits extending only to her biological children." Derek gave me a smug glance. "Guess that rules you out." Jessica looked over her shoulder at me with fake pity. "You know, I'm sure this shelter where they found you might still be around. Maybe they'd appreciate a visit." I sat still, spine straight, hands folded in my lap. Don't react. Don't give them that power. But it stung. God, it stung. Even if I had expected nothing, even if I had prepared myself for this exact outcome, hearing it read aloud like a legal confirmation of my worthlessness still hit like a slap to the soul. I took a breath, hoping it would steady me. It didn't, but I held my composure anyway. Sylvia stood up, smoothing her dress like a curtain closing. "Well, I think that settles it." "Wait," Mr. Keating said. His voice, firm and just slightly hesitant, stopped her mid-step. She turned back, annoyed. "Yes?" He opened his briefcase again and pulled out a small sealed envelope, thick, official-looking, with Frank's signature across the flap. "There's one more document." Silence. Jessica's mouth fell open slightly. Derek leaned forward. Sylvia narrowed her eyes. "What is that?" she asked. Mr. Keating looked directly at me for the first time since we'd entered the room. Silence fell like a curtain. Heavy, final. Mr. Keating held the sealed envelope delicately, almost reverently, as if it were a fragile relic. The kind of thing you don't open unless you're ready for your world to change. Sylvia blinked rapidly. What do you mean, another document? Derek stood up abruptly. That's not possible. We already did this. Mr. Keating didn't respond right away. Instead, he placed the envelope on the table, right in front of him, then reached into his briefcase again, and pulled out a pair of white cotton gloves. He slipped them on slowly, methodically. This document was provided to me directly by Frank Carter 3 weeks before his passing, he said. It was signed in the presence of 2 witnesses, both of whom are legal professionals. It has remained sealed and untouched in my possession, until today. You're lying, Sylvia snapped, voice rising. Frank wouldn't. He already made his decision. Keating gave her a neutral look. Mrs. Carter, with all due respect, your husband was of sound mind when he updated his estate plan. He instructed me to read this second document only after the first had been presented. His exact words were, "They need to hear the first one before they'll understand the second." He sliced open the seal with a small silver letter opener, then unfolded the paper slowly. The rustle echoed like thunder in the stillness. Derek's jaw was tight. Jessica stopped chewing her gum. Mr. Keating began to read. I, Frank Howard Carter, being of sound mind and in full awareness of my actions, declare this to be my final and overriding will and testament, hereby revoking any and all previous wills. Sylvia's lips parted in disbelief. To my wife Sylvia, I leave nothing beyond the life insurance policy already in her name. To my children, Derek and Jessica, I leave my love and hopes for their personal growth. However, they will not receive financial inheritance from my estate, as I believe they have already been given more than enough chances to become people I can be proud of. Jessica gasped. Derek's face turned red. Sylvia let out a noise that sounded somewhere between a choke and a scream. I leave the entirety of my estate, including all properties, businesses, investment accounts, and personal effects, to my son, Brian Carter. The room erupted. You can't be serious. Derek lunged forward, slamming his palms on the table. This is fake. You forged this. I will have you disbarred. Sylvia shouted at Keating, standing now, her eyes wild. You think you can pull this kind of stunt and get away with it? Jessica looked between them, stunned into silence, mouth opening and closing like a fish out of water. I assure you, Keating said calmly, the document is valid, witnessed, notarized, and filed. You are welcome to challenge it in court, but I can promise you the evidence will not be on your side. My heart was pounding. I sat frozen, unsure if I was even breathing. This had to be a mistake, a prank, a dream. I looked down at my hands expecting them to tremble, but they were steady, ice cold, but steady. Brian, Mr. Keating read the last paragraph slowly, has never asked me for anything. He never expected to inherit. He simply loved me as a person, not as a bank. He was there when I was sick, when I was afraid, when the others were too busy or too proud to show up. He made me laugh when I had no strength left. He reminded me who I was, beyond the suits in the boardrooms. That is love, that is family. And that is the legacy I want to leave. I swallowed hard. My throat burned. Sylvia's face twisted with fury. He manipulated Frank. He poisoned him against us. Derek turned on me. You think you can walk in here, take everything our father built? He was my father too, I said quietly. Derek's fist clenched, but he didn't say anything. Jessica stood up, shaking her head. This isn't happening. This isn't real. No, I said softly. It is. Mr. Keating carefully folded the will and placed it back into the envelope. As of this moment, Mr. Brian Carter is the legal heir to the Carter estate. I will be in touch regarding next steps, but I'd advise everyone else to seek separate legal counsel should you wish to contest. Sylvia looked like she was about to faint. Her perfectly controlled composure, the pearl necklace, the tight bun, the icy hauteur, cracked. For a brief second, she looked smaller, not a villain, just a woman who had lost everything she thought was hers by birthright. I stood up slowly, My legs felt distant, like they didn't fully belong to me. I turned to Mr. Keating. "Thank you," I said. He gave me a quiet nod. Without looking back, I walked toward the door. The air in the room buzzed behind me, protests, gasps, chaos, but I didn't stay to hear it. The rain had stopped. A patch of sunlight streamed through the clouds as I stepped outside, blinking in the sudden brightness. For the first time in years, I felt light, and very, very alone. But not in a bad way. The conference room felt colder the next morning, or maybe it was just me, hollowed out from the inside, running on autopilot as I signed document after document. Mr. Keating sat across from me with his usual rigid posture, reading through the formalities with the precision of a surgeon. Deeds, accounts, property transfers, everything with my name on it now. "We've initiated the transition," he said calmly. As per Frank's instructions, the trust was established exactly 30 days before his death. That makes it nearly airtight from a legal standpoint. I looked up. "So they can't challenge it?" "They'll try," he said, lips twitching slightly. "But it won't matter." The assets were no longer part of his estate by the time of death. Legally, he owned almost nothing when the will was read. "It's all in the trust. And the trust belongs solely to you." I nodded. My signature felt strange, like I was tracing someone else's name, even though it was my own. He left instructions, Keating continued, about revoking their access to shared credit lines, family funds, the corporate accounts. Shall I proceed? For a moment I hesitated. My fingers curled slightly, hovering above the page. Then I remembered the look on Sylvia's face yesterday. That smirk just before the will was read. The mockery in Derek's voice. The hollow laughter from Jessica. "Yes," I said. "Proceed." Back in my apartment, everything felt too quiet, too still. I didn't turn the lights on. I sat in the dark, the soft hum of the refrigerator filling the space like white noise. I stared at the ceiling for a long time, before reaching for the old shoebox I hadn't opened in years. It was duct-taped shut, with a torn label that simply read, "Stuff," inside, loose photos, movie tickets, a few fishing lures, and a folded note with my name in Frank's handwriting. On top, I found one of my favorite photos, one I'd nearly forgotten. I was maybe 10, awkwardly holding a fishing rod, wearing a life vest 2 sizes too big. Frank had one arm slung over my shoulder, and was grinning proudly at the camera. I remembered that trip, a long weekend at the lake. Sylvia had refused to come, said she wasn't interested in playing house with someone else's kid. Derek and Jessica stayed behind, just me and Frank. We camped under the stars, ate burnt hot dogs and marshmallows. I remember struggling to bait the hook, and how he helped without making me feel stupid. That night by the fire he said something I never forgot. "You know, Brian," he said, looking out over the dark water, "blood, that's just biology. But you're my choice." I didn't speak. I was too afraid that if I opened my mouth I'd cry and ruin the moment. He continued, slow and careful, like he wanted it burned into my brain. "Being a father isn't about DNA, it's about showing up, teaching, listening, loving. And I chose you. He chose me. Not out of duty, not by accident, not because he had to, because he wanted to." By late afternoon the emails began. First came the automated confirmations. Cards deactivated, account access revoked, passwords changed. Then the alert that the family trust had officially updated beneficiaries. And then, finally, the messages. At 6:42 p.m., my phone buzzed. "Sylvia Carter, what the hell do you think you're doing?" Then seconds later, "You seriously think this is over? You think we'll just let this happen? You're nothing without us. Just a stray your father took pity on?" I stared at the screen, feeling nothing. No anger, no fear, no satisfaction, just silence. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't justice. It was a reset. The slate wasn't clean, but it was mine now. The sun had gone down by the time I pulled the curtains closed. I sat back on the couch, still holding that fishing photo. I traced the edges of Frank's smile with my thumb. I missed him. Not just because he left me everything, but because even when I had nothing, he made me feel like I mattered. He'd once told me that legacy wasn't about wealth. People will forget numbers, but they'll remember how you made them feel. He made me feel like I had a place. And now I did. Sylvia would rage, Derek would threaten, Jessica would scheme. But none of that would change the facts. I had no plans to ruin them. But I wouldn't save them either. Not this time. Frank left me more than money. He left me the truth. I was his son. By choice, by love. And no one could take that away from me. A month passed, not a quiet month, not by a long shot. The fallout from Frank's second will had rippled through the family like a bomb dropped in the middle of a glass house. Shattered egos, frozen assets, angry emails, voicemails that alternated between pleading and threats. I ignored them all. Until Derek called. It was 10:13 on a Thursday morning. I almost didn't pick up. But something about the number flashing across the screen, his name, still saved in my contacts from some long-forgotten group message, made me answer. "Brian," he said, no sarcasm, no smugness, just exhaustion. "Derek," I replied flatly. A pause. "Look, man," he began, voice low and rehearsed. "I know things have been tense, but I'm calling because I need to ask a favor. Temporary. Just a little help to get through a tough spot." I waited. My business got hit hard after Dad passed. I had some obligations, investments, and now I'm in a bit of a cash flow crisis. Nothing huge, just a bridge loan, you know? Something to keep the lights on. He tried to sound casual, but desperation leaked through his voice like a punctured tire. I imagined him in his overpriced condo, the car payments stacking up, the illusion of success crumbling behind him. "Brian?" he asked when I didn't reply. "You want money?" I said, letting the silence stretch. "Just a loan. I'll pay you back. I swear." I almost laughed. "You called me a charity case a month ago, told me to leave before the reading even started. I didn't mean it. It was heat of the moment." "No," I said. "It was exactly what you meant. And I heard you loud and clear." Another pause. "So that's it?" he said bitterly. "You're gonna let your own brother drown?" I bit down the instinct to correct him. We weren't brothers. Never had been. "I'm not going to help you," I said, evenly. "You'll figure it out. Or you won't. But that's not my problem." And I hung up. She knocked on my door holding 2 coffees and a bright, too-practiced smile. I almost didn't recognize her without the usual cloud of superiority in her eyes. "Hey, stranger," she chirped, as if we were college friends reconnecting. "Thought I'd bring you a little peace offering. Vanilla oat milk latte, just how you like it." "How would you know how I like it?" I asked, standing in the doorway, unmoved. "Oh, come on," she laughed nervously. "I pay attention. Besides, we're family. We should talk." I didn't invite her in. She held the coffee out anyway. I didn't take it. "Is this the part where you tell me you've suddenly decided I'm one of you?" I asked. Her smile cracked slightly. "No. I mean, yes. I mean, I've been thinking a lot about how things ended, about how Dad surprised all of us. And I realized, maybe we didn't give you enough credit. Maybe we misjudged you." I folded my arms. "And?" Her voice dropped. "And I need help. The IRS is auditing me. Dad used to handle a lot of our paperwork. Now things are a mess, and I can't afford a decent accountant." "Ah," I said. "There it is." She flinched, just slightly. "It's not like I'm asking for a handout. I'll pay you back." "Sure," I said. "With what? More fake smiles?" That got under her skin. Her eyes narrowed, the friendly mask slipping just a bit. "You know," she said, "Dad would have wanted us to support each other." "No," I said. "He wanted me to stop supporting you." I stepped back and shut the door. Sylvia's message came later that evening. A full-on email this time, complete with subject line, "You've made your point. You're tearing this family apart. Frank would be disgusted with what you're doing. Money has poisoned you, turned you into something cold and cruel. But I suppose we always knew. You were never one of us. I stared at the message for a long time. There was something almost funny about it. The woman who spent years pretending I didn't exist suddenly decided I was responsible for the collapse of her empire. Not to any of them. Instead, I walked out onto the small balcony of my apartment, watching the city lights flicker like a heartbeat in the distance. A car alarm wailed somewhere below. Someone shouted. A dog barked. And for once, I felt still. I wasn't angry. I wasn't gloating. I just wasn't hurting anymore. They were desperate now, not because they'd lost money, but because they'd lost control. Frank had removed the power from their hands and given it to someone they never believed deserved it. They used to look right through me. Now they couldn't stop looking at me. But it didn't matter. They didn't want me. I sat on the couch, phone buzzing again in the background. I let it go. In my lap, I held the old photo again. The one from the lake. The one where Frank had his arm around my shoulders like I was the only kid in the world that mattered. I was alone among them my whole life, I whispered. Now they'll know what that feels like. And this time, I didn't feel guilty. Not even a little. The air in the office felt heavier than usual that morning. The sunlight filtered through the half-closed blinds, casting long stripes of light and shadow across the polished wooden floor. The lawyer sat behind his large dark desk, the silence thick between us. He cleared his throat and reached into a drawer. "There's one more thing," he said quietly, almost reluctantly. "Something Mr. Frank insisted I deliver personally." He slid a sealed cream-colored envelope across the desk toward me. The paper was heavy, the handwriting unmistakably familiar. Dad's. My hands trembled as I picked it up. The familiar looped letters of his signature held a weight far beyond any will or trust fund. This was personal. I broke the seal carefully, unfolding the letter inside. "Brian, I know the truth may have been hard for you to understand, that I am not your father by blood, but that never mattered to me. You are my son by choice, by life, by love. I chose you the moment I held you in my arms. You've always been the one who saw me for who I was, beyond the expectations of family or tradition. While others looked only at what you weren't, I saw exactly who you are, strong, honest, and true. If anything, this letter is my way of saying, you were never alone, and you never will be. I hope this brings you some peace. With all my love." I read the words again, and then again. The room blurred. The strength I'd carried for so long cracked open like fragile glass. For the first time, tears ran freely down my cheeks. Not tears of anger or bitterness, but of release. The release of years of carrying a weight I didn't understand, a sense of not belonging. Dad had seen me, chosen me, despite it all. I folded the letter slowly, clutching it like a lifeline. This wasn't just a legal battle won or lost. This was a reclaiming of my identity. I left the office with a strange lightness. The world outside was no less chaotic, no less cruel, but inside me, something had shifted. That night, I sat in my small apartment surrounded by the relics of my life. The old photos, the worn-out fishing gear, the memories of summers spent on the lake with Dad. I thought back to the fishing trip I'd nearly forgotten, the one where Dad said to me quietly, "Blood is biology. You're my choice." Now I understood. The next day I called the lawyer. "I want to create a foundation," I said, my voice steady but filled with purpose. "In Dad's name, to support kids like me, kids who need someone to choose them." He nodded, the surprise in his eyes quickly replaced by respect. This was no longer about inheritance or family grudges. This was about legacy, about honoring the man who had chosen me, loved me, and believed in me, even when the world did not. And for the first time in my life, I felt at peace. The ballroom was softly lit, a gentle glow bouncing off the polished floors and the elegant decorations. It was the kind of place where success and generosity were celebrated, where people in tuxedos and evening gowns exchanged polite smiles and stories over glasses of sparkling wine. Tonight, though, I wasn't just a guest, I was the guest of honor. As I stepped onto the small stage, the room quieted, the chatter hushed to attentive silence. I looked out at the crowd, a sea of faces illuminated by warm light, friends, supporters, even strangers who believed in what this foundation stood for. And then, in the far corner near the back, I saw them. Sylvia, Derek, and Jessica, my former family. They sat together, dressed impeccably but looking uneasy, their eyes occasionally flicking toward me. There was something in their gaze, a mixture of regret, envy, and perhaps a hint of sadness. For a moment, I let myself feel it all, the years of feeling invisible, the cold dismissals, the harsh words about who I was really supposed to be. But then I reminded myself why I was here. I cleared my throat and began. This foundation was born out of a story that isn't just mine but many others, I said, my voice steady. It's about the kids who don't feel seen, who feel like outsiders in their own homes. My dad once told me, "You're not defined by the blood that runs through your veins, but by the love you give and receive." I shared memories of my father, the man who had chosen me, who had believed in me when others did not. I talked about the importance of family, not the one you're given, but the one you build. As I spoke, I felt a calm settle inside me. The resentment I'd carried for so long began to dissolve, replaced by something stronger, pride, peace, and purpose. After the speech, people came up to congratulate me, to share their own stories, to thank me for turning pain into hope. And then, as the evening wound down, I glanced again at the corner where they sat. Sylvia caught my eye for a brief second. No words were exchanged, but I saw her lips press into a thin line. Maybe acceptance, maybe defeat. I smiled softly to myself. I was never part of their family, but now, I've built my own.